Good afternoon, I'm Jake Tapper. Welcome to The Lead. We begin with the world lead. There are those who think he is a defender of our basic freedoms. There are those who think he's a traitor to his country, and there are those who just don't know what to think. Edward Snowden is the 29-year-old intelligence contractor who leaked top-secret National Security Agency information, revealing the incredible extent to which the U.S. government is monitoring and keeping records of not just our phone calls, but also apparently our emails, internet searches, downloads, photos, Facebook pages, and on and on. Snowden told the Guardian newspaper, which broke this story, that he did this to wake you up.
Even if you're not doing anything wrong, you're being watched and recorded. You simply have to eventually fall under suspicion from somebody, even by a wrong call, and then they can use the system to go back in time and scrutinize every decision you've ever made.
Critics have questioned Snowden's motives, but not the authenticity of his information, which paints a picture of a massive surveillance state, a government that keeps tabs on who you call, for how long, where you were when you placed the call, and a national security infrastructure that has some sort of access to your emails. The White House today said leaks like this help those who seek to kill Americans.
Leaks of sensitive classified information that cause harm to our national security interests are a problem, a serious problem.
Snowden is currently in hiding. The last we heard, he was in Hong Kong. Before leaking the information, he worked as an infrastructure analyst for intelligence contractor Booz Allen Hamilton, where he had access to this information, though he contacted the Guardian newspaper in February before he worked for Booz Allen Hamilton. In the past, he also worked for the CIA. He was making $200,000 and sharing a home with his girlfriend in Hawaii. Snowden says he left home 3 weeks ago without telling her what he planned. He says he went to Hong Kong because he thinks it's actually a lot more independent than many Western governments. The Guardian revealed Snowden's identity at his own request. The Department of Justice has opened an investigation into Snowden's leaks, and the FBI is investigating too, searching his house, taking his computers, trying to interview his family, friends, co-workers, girlfriend, according to a federal law enforcement source. Part of the reason Snowden says he went public is that President Obama let him down. He tells The Guardian, "I did not vote for him. I voted for a third party, but I believed in Obama's promises. I was going to disclose it, but waited because of his election." He continued with the policies of his predecessor. "I believed in Obama's promises," he says. Like what? Well, maybe like this from then-Senator Obama in October 2007.
Your next president will actually believe in the Constitution, which you can't say about your current president. When I'm president, one of the first things I'm going to do is call in my attorney general and say to him or her, "I want you to review every executive order that's been issued by George Bush, whether it relates to warrantless wiretaps or detaining people or reading emails or whatever it is. I want you to go through every single one of them, and if they are unconstitutional, if they're encroaching on civil liberties unnecessarily, we are going to overturn them. We are going to change them."
Now, President Obama's pushback to criticism is that he has increased the checks and balances for these programs, bringing the foreign surveillance courts into the process, for instance, and he insists looping in Congress.
When it comes to telephone calls, every member of Congress has been briefed on this program.
Every member of Congress has been briefed on this program. Not true. Every member of Congress has not been briefed on the phone data program. But don't take my word for it. Here's Democratic Congressman Keith Ellison on this show the very same day President Obama made that claim.
Some members of Congress know about this, but a lot don't. I mean, if you're not on the Intelligence Committee, you may not be in the loop at all. I'm not.
But the president says not to worry. This is all being done by professionals who are responsible with these secrets. Now, it turns out that there are at least 1.4 million Americans with top secret access. And until a few days ago, Edward Snowden was one of these trustworthy souls. Are we really to take at face value the trust us we're being told about this vast surveillance apparatus? Snowden's move, whether or not you agree with it, it puts this back on the people.
The public needs to decide whether these programs and policies are right or wrong. And I'm willing to go on the record to defend the authenticity of them and say, I didn't change these. I didn't modify the story. This is the truth. This is what's happening. You should decide whether we need to be doing this.
And joining me now is Glenn Greenwald of The Guardian, who has been working with Snowden since February. Glenn, I guess now we know why you're in Hong Kong. You've said other reports about the details of interactions you had with Snowden are false or inaccurate. So lay it out. How did Snowden find you? When did he reach out to you? How did you know he was the real deal?
He contacted me for the first time all the way back in February, and subsequently told me that I was the first person in journalism that he thought about contacting and that he did contact. And we exchanged a few emails back at the time. He wanted to speak with me, he said, regarding a very sensitive and important matter, and wanted me to install very sophisticated email encryption in order to have that conversation. It was something that I didn't know how to do. He actually wrote out a few emails directing me step by step how to do it. And when I still didn't do it, he actually made a video instructing me how to do it. And when I still didn't do it, just because it was sort of something that wasn't on my radar, I was working on other things, he then went to Laura Poitras, who is an award-winning filmmaker whose film was nominated for an Academy Award, with whom I've worked in several different capacities, who did have encrypted email, and he began speaking with her and told her that he wanted to involve me in this as well. And from that point forward, we began speaking about the possibility that he would be prepared to blow the whistle on some very serious and disturbing conduct inside the National Security Agency.
There are reports that he's checked out of his hotel in Hong Kong today. Do you know where he is? Is he still in Hong Kong?
I know where he is. Generally, I'm not going to talk about where he is, either in general or specifically. He's a source, and I'm not going to disclose information about his whereabouts. He's perfectly capable of doing that himself if he wants to.
Some supporters of his even criticize Hong Kong as his choice. The former security secretary for Hong Kong described his choice of location as, quote, really being based on unfortunate ignorance, and said it'd be wise if he left to avoid extradition. Do you think there's any way Snowden does not end up being extradited to the United States? And where do you think he should have gone? You were tweeting people asking them to suggest alternatives.
As he put it, he had no good options. He tried to find a place that he thought the political values in that place were amenable to him. There's robust political dissent and lots of free speech in Hong Kong, even though there's not in China. But he knew that there was a very good likelihood, because the U.S. is the most powerful government in the world, that what he did would result in very harmful repercussions to him. And that's what makes his act so courageous. So I don't know what the situation is with the PRC in the U.S. and Hong Kong and how. I don't think anyone knows. But if he does end up prosecuted by the U.S., that certainly won't have been a surprise to him. He knew there was a real possibility that that would happen when he did it.
I want to get your response to some of the blowback, I guess we'll call it, from the Obama administration. The Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, said in congressional testimony back in March something quite controversial. I want to play that for you.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly.
Now, Clapper was asked about that statement in an interview with Andrea Mitchell over the weekend, and he said it was like a "when are you going to stop beating your wife" kind of question, and he thought he answered it truthfully with a no. What's your response to what Director Clapper has said in response to questions about this from Senator Wyden and others?
I'm really glad you're asking about that, Jake. And you know, I've been trying to make this point, you know, all day, which is that I know there's a lot of dramatic interest in what's happening with Snowden, but the real focus here should be on exactly what you just asked about, which is what the National Security Agency is doing in total secrecy and whether or not they've been truthful with the U.S. Congress about what it is that they've been doing. And that answer that he just gave, which is that the United States is not wittingly collecting data on millions of Americans, we know to be an outright falsehood, because last week we published a document that demonstrates that the Obama administration has been going to the secret FISA court every 3 months and asking for and obtaining all phone records for all Americans for every call they make internationally and locally, without any concern with whether or not the people on whom they're collecting this data have engaged in any wrongdoing, which is millions of Americans by definition. I would also add that the Senate Intelligence Committee has repeatedly asked the NSA to give a rough estimate of how many Americans are being spied upon in terms of their telephone calls and their email exchanges. And the NSA has continuously said we are incapable of providing that kind of an assessment. And yet on Friday, we published documents from their program called Boundless Informant that provides extremely detailed metrics with great mathematical exactitude about exactly how many communications they're intercepting 3 billion every day in terms of data that they're storing, and even indicates in which country the communications are originating. And so it seems like this agency that has no accountability and that Obama is boasting now is subject to congressional oversight has been misleading the Congress in serious ways about what it is that they do and what it is that they can say they do.
Clapper has attacked these leaks, calling them gut-wrenching. You tweeted this in response. Clapper, leaks literally gut-wrenching, huge, grave damage. Save some melodrama and rhetoric for coming stories. You'll need it. So, Glenn,
right, and
you have more big stories coming?
We do have more big stories coming without question. And let me just say, I hope that when the U.S. government says what they say in every single case when you uncover their secret misconduct, which is these people have endangered national security and made people should be afraid that they're going to be attacked by the terrorists, we should all be rational and not simply accept that claim. I defy anybody, Jake, to go and look at what it is that we published over the last week and describe how any of that could have harmed national security. Terrorists already know that the U.S. government tries to surveil their communications. Nothing that we revealed helps, quote unquote, the terrorists. All we did was tell our fellow citizens in the United States and around the world the extent and capabilities of how vast the surveillance state is and the reasons why it needs scrutiny and accountability. And the only things we've damaged are the reputation of American political officials and not national security.
I want to read you a response from one of the tech companies referenced in the PRISM story. As you know, there's been some back and forth about how willing they've been participating. Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, took to his Facebook page and wrote, "Facebook is not and has never been part of any program to give the U.S. or any other government direct access to our servers. We have never received a blanket request or court order from any government agency asking for information or metadata in bulk like the one Verizon reportedly received. And if we did, we would fight it aggressively. We hadn't even heard of PRISM." Now, I know that there are statements in that comment that Zuckerberg wrote that are one could parse. For instance, okay, he didn't know it was called PRISM, but that doesn't mean he didn't know that there wasn't a program. But is there anything specifically in what he and the other tech companies have said that is not true, just downright false?
Here's what our story reported. That we have a top secret document from the NSA that talks about the PRISM program, and what it describes in its own words is direct collection of data from the servers of those companies. So we reported that. We then went to the tech companies before our story was published. We asked them about it. They said that wasn't true. We reported that the tech companies deny it and that there was a discrepancy between what the NSA claims is going on between the companies and the government and what the companies claim. That was the nature of our story, is they are denying that what the NSA says they're doing. Maybe it's because the NSA is doing it without their knowledge. Maybe because there's semantic games going on. Maybe the truth is in between. Since then, the New York Times did more reporting and documented the very extensive negotiations that exactly Mark Zuckerberg denied, in which the NSA went to Silicon Valley executives and asked for full direct access to their servers. They negotiated. Different companies gained varying forms of access, but it's still quite ambiguous. I want the American people, and they should know, that exactly what it is that the government and the tech companies are collaborating on, are negotiating, are talking about in terms of turning over access to all this data that millions of people around the world use to communicate with one another to the U.S. government. This should all be done in public, not in the dark.
Glenn Greenwald in Hong Kong, columnist for The Guardian. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Jake. Appreciate it.
Coming up on The Lead.